Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And we're back with a movie-related topic. I feel like that's perfect for what I will say is the beginning of fall. Yes, mainly because it's actually kind of cool. And it has been for the past couple of days, meaning around 60s or 70s before like 10. So for us, that's huge. Huge.
Okay.
It's not hit beyond 90, which is incredible. For the like August and September. I know everybody's like, what? But with that, just feels like movie season. Like when you get to come in and watch the movies. And some of these movies, since it's like school related, high school related, even feels like on topic. Because yes, all the kids are back to school. They've been back to school for like a month. I'm sorry to y'all, because that sounds awful. And we're not talking about the movie, and I'm about to get to it, but Anney, don't think we've actually watched this for the show, and I'm kind of shocked by that. I already talked about this yesterday. I didn't realize we've never done this as a feminist movie, which is a shame, which I feel like we're going to have to like fix soon. But we're talking about the overall trope of it, and we're talking about the mean girl trope. And the mean girl trope has many names, and we're going to be referencing all the different names. And we will be cursing a little bit because, you know, they don't like women and oftentimes degrade them in these tropes. We know this. And I say they as in like filmmakers and entertainers and all those people. So yes, we'll be referencing the movie quite a bit as it obviously has a big impact. Seriously, the title of the movie is Mean Girl. So
yeah.
Yeah. But first we want to note that Mean Girls goes way back, like the actual idea of them. One specifically noted from Jane Austen's classic, Pride and Prejudice, which we did cover. Hello, Caroline Bingley. I feel like she is an ultimate mean girl. She never does get a redemption arc either. So the original mean girl. So let's start with this question. Anney, do you have a favorite mean girl or like a scenario of mean girls?
Oh, no. I remember when you suggested this, I said, this is like so out of what I...
But it's not, because horror movies use this trope quite often.
They do, but I bet I classify it differently than how I classify a mean girl.
No, because I would think bodies, mean girl.
I would just call that a hot mess.
You might, but the mean girl's there, which is why we have that whole like ousting of friendships and then like calling each other out for not being around. It's kind of this level of mean girl, I would say. More, I'm sure. I can't think of it in my... Well, Jennifer's Body is actually... We're going to mention that movie, and that is a mean girl movie as well, essentially. So, you know, there's more than you think. The mean girl has had evolution, an essential like growth and updates. So with that, that's what we're seeing. And a lot of horror movies, Carrie, I'm mentioning that as well, also has... Which... You have watched that, right?
No.
Oh my God. I keep coming back to all the movies. Like every time you tell me you haven't watched something, even though you've already told me this, I'm in shock. But I will also say I was also in shock when you do tell me you've watched a movie. I'm like, wait, you have seen that one? Death Becomes Her?
I'm an enigma.
You are. Death Becomes Her. You have watched that. We haven't talked about that. And those, like, that's two mean girls, two alpha girls going after each other, which is even funnier. But anyway, I digress. There's a lot. And I think I'm gonna put a spoiler here because we are talking a little bit about one of your favorite movies, Encanto, and it's fairly new, and we do kind of spoil a couple of things. So, FYI, that's coming towards the end. So let's begin. What is a mean girl exactly? Here's how Victoria Conleon, sorry if I've said that wrong, describes them for VNHSmirror.com. In teen media, the mean girl is typically an antagonistic character, notoriously good at tormenting the main character. These girls are often portrayed as popular, vain, selfish, and manipulative. Always sporting the best style, they come from rich families with an air of determined self-assurance.
And from a wonderful article written by student Ivy Jen for their school on highlight.org, here's how she explains the mean girl. Quote, according to online entertainment magazine The Take, the mean girl is confident, cunning, and manipulative. She often finds entertainment from humiliating others, but is still seen as charismatic and alluring by her peers. On the surface, she's the face of power and corruption. She personifies the status quo of the social hierarchy with a clique that enforces her tyrannical nature.
What is that movie that we just watched where it's the influencer going on the bachelorette party?
Sissy.
This is, again, the mean girl. We see, like, we don't understand why she's mean. I mean, she was mean from the beginning and pushed her over the edge, but it ended up being a horror movie.
Yes.
Again, like, there's so many of these examples. She has to humiliate her. She has to be right. She's the one that has all the money. She does all the things, buys the nice things. This is the mean girl. And we'll come back to Ivy's article because she has a very great insight on the theory on the mean girl trope and its evolution. And I was so impressed with her. I think she is her high school newspaper, essentially. And I was like, but it's good, so I'm going to use it. I love it. And her writing was wonderful, so good on you, Ivy. But first, let's talk about the origins of the mean girl and how it has been used throughout our entertainment history and just history in general, so sociology. Mean girls have been around for the entirety of the existence of humans. It has. But the term itself didn't come around until 2002 when author Rosalind Wiseman coined the term in her book, Queen Bees and Wannabes. And for a bit of background on that, Wiseman, who was originally a martial arts teacher, I believe she does have a degree in political science. She taught young women. She wrote this book, which pushed her into the world of being an author and public speaker. And as we were researching the topic, we didn't exactly find what catapulted her into that world necessarily. Like there wasn't just an aha moment. But she does often talk about how she witnessed the constant social cycles within girls' circles. So here's a bit from her Wikipedia page. So take this with a grain of salt. After hearing the young girls' questions about social issues they faced and watching them become empowered by martial arts, Wiseman was inspired to begin working in youth empowerment and leadership building. After spending over a decade speaking with girls about the social issues they face, including boys, cliques, gossip, social hierarchy, and self-image, Wiseman wrote Queen Bees and Wannabes. The book gives suggestions on how parents can better understand and help their daughters navigate the social atmosphere of what Wiseman refers to as, quote, girl world. Since its release in 2002, it has become a New York Times bestseller and was the basis for the 2004 film Mean Girls. And though the actual trope, again, it's been around forever. So let's just, like, we know what it is without giving it the name, right? Because you can look at the movie Carrie, which apparently Anney hasn't seen.
Nope.
And it is the epitome of Mean Girls for real. Or even children's classics, The Parent Trap. There's, like, even though they're not truly mean girls, they are mean girls to each other at first. They bully each other. I don't understand. Although, again, this falls into the more lovable, misunderstood mean girl trope, which is part of the evolution of the mean girl that we're going to talk about later. The term came after the coining within this self-help book. And by the way, the author has written many more books, and including advice for adult mean girl situations, like in the workplace. Also, I believe they are on the 3rd edition of the original book, so as to keep up with the times and the changes.
Yeah, new movie too.
Yeah.
Also, I just realized I've seen The Rage Carrie 2.
That makes me want to flip this table, so you need to stop talking.
It's because there was a song in there I liked.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I'll give you that.
Okay, anyway, Wiseman often uses titles like Queen Bee and Alpha Girls to categorize the mean girls. And throughout the book and in her classes and seminars, she's really classified the different types. In one reference, she would use the term really mean girls, or RMGs, as a reference for alpha girls. Here's a bit from a 2004 New York Times article titled Girls Just Want to Be Mean, where they talk about having an apology day in one of Wiseman's classes. Quote, The girls whom Weissman variously calls the alpha girls, the RMGs, really mean girls, are the queen bees, are the ones who are supposed to own up to having backstabbed or dumped a friend, but they are also the most resistant to the exercise and the most self-justifying. The girls who are their habitual victims or hangers-on, the wannabes and messengers in Weissman's lingo, are always apologizing anyway.
Right. And within the article, they talk a bit more about Wiseman herself, as well as a great reference to, again, one of our favorites, Heathers. We've mentioned a lot of movies in here that we have watched.
Yeah.
So, just listen to those. Here's a quote. Wiseman, who is 32 and hip and girlish herself, has taught this class at many different schools. And it's fair to say that although she loves girls, she does not cling to sentimental notions about them. She is a feminist, but not the sort likely to ascribe greater inherent compassion to women or girls as a group than to men or boys. More, her style is the analysis of the feminist historian Elizabeth Fox Genovese, who has observed that, quote, those who have experienced dismissal by the junior high school girls clique could hardly, with a straight face, claim generosity and nurture as a natural attribute of women. Together, Weissman and I once watched the movie Heathers, the 1989 black comedy about a triad of vicious queen bees who got their comeuppance, and she found it, quote, pretty true to life. The line uttered by Winona Ryder as Veronica, the disaffected non-Heather of the group, struck her as particularly apt. I don't really like my friends. It's just like they're people I work with, and our job is being popular.
And the article gives a bit more factual context on the Mean Girls and why we may have been inundated with so much Mean Girl content in the 90s and 2000s. Quote, this focus on the cruelty of girls is, of course, something new. For years, psychologists who studied aggression among school children looked only at its physical and overt manifestations and concluded that girls were less aggressive than boys. That consensus began to change in the early 90s after a team of researchers led by a Finnish professor named Kaj Bjorkqvist, started interviewing 11 and 12-year-old girls about their behavior toward one another. The team's conclusion was that the girls were, in fact, just as aggressive as boys, though in a different way. They were not as likely to engage in physical fights, for example, but their superior social intelligence enabled them to wage complicated battles with other girls aimed at damaging relationships or reputations, leaving nasty messages by cell phone or spreading scurrilous rumors by email, making friends with one girl as revenge against another, gossiping about someone just loudly enough to be overheard. Turning the notion of women's greater empathy on its head, Bjorkqvist focused on the destructive uses to which such emotional attunement could be put. Girls can better understand how other girls feel, as he puts it, so they know better how to harm them.
I will say that just triggered me to a middle school incident on the playground with my friends where we were separated and one person wasn't invited to a birthday party. I had that moment.
Jeez.
So I'm not completely wrong about this, whole level. But I was always a girl's girl. If you did something wrong, I was mad at you. If you did something really wrong. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, nah. But yeah, I just had this moment. Wow, poor Maria. Sorry, Maria. So the article goes on to highlight other studies that came soon after. Here's something that was written in relation to Rachel Simmons' work titled Odd Girl Out, The Hidden Culture of Aggression in Girls. In her book, the 27-year-old Simmons offers a plaintive definition of relational aggression. Unlike boys who tend to bully acquaintances or strangers, girls frequently attack within tightly knit friendship networks, making aggression harder to identify and intensifying the damage to the victims. Within the hidden culture of aggression, girls fight with body language in relationships instead of fists and knives. In this world, friendship is a weapon, and the sting of a shout pales in comparison to a day of someone's silence. There is no gesture more devastating than back-turning away. Now, Simmons insists is the time to pull up the rock and really look at this seething underside of American girlhood. Beneath the facade of female intimacy, she writes, lies a terrain traveled in secret, marked with anguish, and nourished by silence. She's not completely wrong.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Again, this kind of also reminds me of a New Girl episode where the two, Jess and Cece, don't talk to each other. Like, they don't actually fight, but they do passive aggressive things, but they know they're in a fight and no one else knows that they're in a fight.
Right.
And then when
Yeah.
they actually get physical with each other, they feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And you screamed at each other, they've released it all, and they're
Mm-hmm.
friends again. But I'm like, that doesn't typically happen. When that happens, friendship usually just over
Right.
by that point. Anyway, and though it isn't mentioned in the article about how the patriarchy and misogyny are big influences within this relative aggression that they have termed this type of actions, they do go on to look into other ages and emotional factors for the reaction. And I don't think we're the only ones who thought about this. Here's another quote from the ceconline.com article. It says, "To get into the discourse of it all, the popular mean girl trope is a caricature fueling internalized misogyny in all of us. Ironically, she's often written by men. As much as we know that she is an exaggerated and unrealistic movie character, she is so ingrained in our minds that it feels like surely some of her must be real and must be present in real women. Hollywood has pulled this long con on us over decades in an act of what we would now call next level gaslighting. This archetype made us feel bad for not being unrealistically beautiful, rich, or thin, but more than that, did it encourage an era of bullying that caused more damage than anyone could have expected. These movies told us that being mean is what made you popular. We can't help but wonder what this did for the psyche of teenagers growing up." So just coupling the two ideas about, okay, this is how you win a war is by being mean to a group, like ganging up on someone, versus also seeing that in Hollywood films, as well as not realizing this is only helping one set of peoples and it's not women or marginalized peoples. But I found that very interesting that none of the earlier works really talks about it. I also want to go ahead and talk about the way they describe Wiseman's feminism as very like low key, almost to the point of saying, "I'm not feminist, but,"
Mm-hmm.
type of conversation. I was like, oh, okay. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. However, Wiseman did continue to make additions to keep up with the changes of the times. So what we were talking about when we were talking about her theories was the 2004 edition. And the self-help book did have an impact, again, in the trope itself, literally being the reason that the movie Mean Girls was even thought of by Tina Fey, who actually did consult a bit with Wiseman. I don't know, though, if she took a lot of that advice, Tina Fey. I think she took a lot of stuff out and did her own thing, did talk to Wiseman, but kind of like just, okay, cool, thanks, type of situation,
Yeah.
from what I've read. I don't think she likes a new version.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's what just a quick heads up. I've not seen that. With that background, let's talk about the Mean Girls. The main inspiration actually comes from the classic Heathers. Yes, we did this feature as one of our first movies. I remember it well, being on your beach house,
Yeah.
watching it on your small TV.
Yep.
Because you had bought it for me on DVD, and I'm like, yes, let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
But like we said before, the Mean Girls have been around way before this, but this was kind of the quintessential beginning. And again, what Wiseman took as examples, but like, yeah, the fairy tale Cinderella is about Mean Girls. Her wicked stepsisters and her mother, yeah, hey, Mean Girl theme. They were real mean to her, but she, succeeded without them. And there's different versions of what happens to them, but it's not nice.
Mm.
But Heathers, yes, is a staple when it comes to the best example. Here's a bit from the teenmagazine.com about Mean Girls. "I can't talk about the mean girl trope without first mentioning Heathers, the 1989 cult classic that simultaneously became the blueprint for the archetype and defied the somewhat sexist expectations of teenage girls. Heathers show the consequences not just of mean girls' actions themselves, but of societal misunderstanding of teens and angst, while poking fun at the characters and the subject matter with hilarious self-awareness."
So in the typical story, we have a girl often seen as innocent or an outsider or both who are pitted against another girl and her posse. And this posse is seen as popular and cool, and they dictate the social hierarchy in their territory. And again, with another reference to the Heathers, here's a bit more about the leader, or as Wiseman may call her, the Alpha, from that CEC online article. Quote, "We know her so well. She's gorgeous, she's wealthy, she's smart, she drives boys crazy, and above all, she's the absolute worst. She's the popular mean girl in every teen movie we grew up watching, and she's completely made up. Despite her not existing, this archetype has stuck around for decades, still being used today in movies, series, and reality TV. So implanted in our minds that we're convinced that her real life incarnation must be out there somewhere, waiting to pounce and make us feel bad. Despite feminism, pop culture, and representation making so many progressive strides, why is the popular mean girl so indelible, and why the hell was she created in the first place? What is it that makes this character so quintessentially her? She's stereotypically beautiful, of course, but she's also really f***ing mean. From one of her first iterations embodied by Heather Chandler and Heathers to Chanel #1 and Scream Queens, she's tall, skinny, white, and she has salon-quality hairstyling every day, despite being in high school. She's also always rich, and not in a quiet luxury kind of way. We'll see ostentatious shots of her family's massive suburban house, her fancy car, often convertible sports cars, it was the 90s, her huge bedroom and bed, and most obviously, her incredible wardrobe.
Right. And we're not really talking about the depth of how most of the mean girls at the beginning were white and very rich and very sexual, or seen as very sexual. We're not really talking about that part at this point. We should. I think I just ran out with time. So we'll come back to that maybe at a different point when we talk about other tropes, I'm sure. But yeah, that is something to be seen. Although there is conversations about how more and more people of color have been put as the mean girls. Asian girls I've seen as being put in as the mean girl, rich, smart, all those things, and sexually active, obviously. And it seems like that's kind of the filler. Like, oh, you want more people of color? We'll put them in this role then.
Mm-hmm.
It will shake it up.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just for fun, because I love it. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Heathers, and really how it brought in an age and generation of mean girls, and again, their importance. And this is from GameRant.com. Though it has appeared in many, many iterations since the earliest example of mean girl tropes as we know it today, it came from the 1988 movies, or 1989, Heathers. Heathers had a sort of renaissance lately because of the surging popularity of the musical adaptation, but the original movie was kind of a cult classic for a long time. The mean girls in questions are the Heathers themselves, 3 teenage girls, all named Heather, who rule the school as a group. Heather Chandler is the head and is the ultimate pinnacle of the mean girl, so much so that basically everyone who came after was based on this model. She, along with other girls, is fundamentally motivated by status and social hierarchy, whether that's gaining it or maintaining the capital she already has. That's kind of the definition of the mean girl. She is confident, ambitious, and cunning, but she uses these traits to uphold power and manipulate others into doing her bidding, thereby keeping her as the queen bee. It's also important to the trope that other people want to be her, and Heather Chandler's social status is so coveted by others that it literally has deadly consequences in the stories, and oftentimes in horror stories. Interestingly, some would call the mean girl trope the Heather trope. Like, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. According to an article titled The Heather Trope, what is it and how do you write this character? We're not giving you advice how to write, by the way. Just talk about the Heather part. They write, a Heather is a character trope that describes the popular person of the high school. Typically, a Heather is a female character who is traditionally beautiful and is desired by both men and women. A character who falls into the Heather trope is often complex and driven by desire to keep up a well-manicured appearance. Similar to the mean girl, the Heather can come off as mean-spirited, even if they're trying to be nice. This is due to the audience's perception of these types of characters, which leads to a later understanding of the character's complexities that make them feel the need to appear a certain way.
And it continues, quote, the Heather trope appeals to the female desire to be understood and accepted as they are rather than what they appear to be. It is a trope that can often be misunderstood and misrepresented, creating a character that is mean just because they're pretty.
So yeah, it's a little bit different in the wanting to be accepted part. They actually go on to use Jennifer from Jennifer's Body, again, we watched that one too, as an example of this, and also as an example of taking down the patriarchy. So they use the mean girl trope to take down the man. I'm like, okay, that's an appropriate way.
Yeah.
I approve of this way. So I am definitely the feminist that the other article is referring. Now, one of the things we didn't talk about with Wiseman's books and classes is her breakdown of these groups, which is often seen, again, within like Heathers and Mean Girls and other classic films. But it is understood that part of the downfall and the catalyst within the Mean Girl/girls trope is the battle to become the RMG or the alpha. And I love that this word was in usage for Mean Girls and now has become more popular for like the referencing of a strong male leader.
But back to the GameRant.com article, they continue to break down how the group is seen within different movies. Quote, Heathers itself is a satire and more of an indictment on society for forcing young girls to get to this point more than anything else. But the fundamental tropes it presented became staples of teen movies into the 90s and 2000s. Mean Girls presented a more modern version of the trio from Heathers, from the head mean girl, Heather Chandler and Regina George, to the jealous lackey, Heather Duke and Gretchen Wieners, to the dumb one who might secretly be the nicest of the trio, Heather McNamara and Karen Smith. The bare bones of the plot of Mean Girls is similar to Heathers as well. The protagonist, Veronica/Katie, befriends the popular girls and thinks they've cracked the code of social status, only to find that the world of the mean girl is much darker than they thought, and they don't like how it changes them.
Yes, after they get called out, of course.
Yeah.
So the RMG or the alpha bitch, or alpha, because a lot of them call them the alpha bitch, or queen bee, is the antagonist. And I'm saying this with a capital A, the antagonist, and is the epitome of power or of evil, or both. And here's a bit from tvtropes.org. The alpha is living, breathing evidence that popular is evil. From stealing your crush to humiliating you in front of the whole school, there's no low she won't stoop to in order to oppress her dorky classmates and assert herself as the queen. She will often win homecoming queen or prom queen in a landslide vote or not, and that's their takedown. And oftentimes she's the authority of the cheerleading squad and decides who's on and off the squad. After all, who needs a coach? Hello, bring it on.
And they continue, quote, she's also usually the scion of a wealthy and influential family, the star of the school or head sister of the influential college sorority house, thus providing her a network of local celebrity, influence, and wealth to exploit. She's also quite the seductress, even going so far as to bear her midriff as a method of intimidation. And consequently, all the boys fight amongst themselves, sometimes literally, to be her oppressed boyfriend. And to top it off, she's also very good looking. All this leaves her with the belief that she can do whatever she likes without consequences. Unfortunately, she's often right. The powers that be are not immune to her family's wealth, connections, and influence, and they can and will be corrupted or coerced into overlooking her bad behavior. Her natural enemy is the loser heroine. Whenever their eternal, jealousy-fueled struggle over possessions, boyfriends, and status is sparked anew, quarter will neither be asked for nor given.
So with all those details, we have to ask, why does the mean girl trope work, and has it grown with the times? Maybe it's not the fact that it worked, but with a sense of entertainment and for tales like Cinderella, Heathers, and Carrie, more of it is about justice, like having the deadly ending that brings a bit of satisfaction in the story, that vengeance. And as the times changed, we see a bit of a shift into the lovable alpha or the Reginas who's able to release their anger and finally be themselves.
Yeah. Yep. Here's some thoughts on the mean girl and what we as a society may see about them from womensrepublic.net. Quote, contrary to her male counterpart, the jock bully, who is usually dumb and lacks a promising future, the mean girl is full of potential. She believes in herself and is aware of her own intelligence. Her personality drives these positive characteristics to a hyper-competitive extreme and makes her a skilled yet cruel and devious ruler. The core of the Mean Girl's character is often deep insecurity and anger. She is guided by her rage and her cynical and deep understanding of the world. Rachel McAdams' portrayal of Regina George captures this eloquently in Regina's meltdown after finding out that Katie was deceiving her all along, or in the regular rude outburst she has towards her mom. The Mean Girl is really just an angry girl in need of boundaries and guidance. Unable to deal with her emotions, she projects her anger into selfishness and protects herself from the outside world climbing the social hierarchy. The Mean Girl is well aware of how society works. Instead of fighting these structures, she upholds them because at least that way she can end up on top.
Right. And the writer goes into more detail of what makes a good Mean Girl. She writes, a successful portrayal of Mean Girl trope should include a motive to the meanness. Sharpay Evans wanted to star on Broadway. Regina George was addicted to the power of being influential and saw her own self-worth in popularity. Blair Waldorf relied on her status to achieve her dreams. The Mean Girl needs a backstory to make her authentic. Explaining her behavior simply on the basis of her gender is sexist and unsatisfying. Her life also isn't all it's cut out to be. Regina George is on a constant diet to maintain her figure. Cheryl Blossom lost her brother and closest friend. Rosalie Hale, hello Twilight, hates being a vampire, the foundation of her existence. The Mean Girl is smart. She has a signature look, and most importantly, she exudes desirability on several levels, which remains even after her downfall. So we know that we have to have Mean Girls for some of these movies, and hopefully they come back together with like, oh, it wasn't a competition, hopefully. Or, Taking Down Man. Either one of those. So the Mean Girl must be the feminine representation as well. So here's some interesting thoughts from Madison Huizinga. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong. And what she wrote in her Substack about Mean Girls. So Mean Girl is always hyper feminine. She embodies feminine stereotypes on steroids. Immaculate faces of ultra glamorous makeup, Victoria's Secret push-up bras, bedazzled notebooks, luscious waterfalls of thick hair, manicured nails, and an undying obsession with fashion. Mean Girls of the 90s and early 2000s looked like they got caught in a Claire's thunderstorm followed by a limited 2 tornado.
What a reference. What a reference. And she continues in her writing, quote, the cookie cutter characterization of a hyper feminine mean girl and an unfeminine protagonist is not an accident. There is a reason why this formula has thrived for decades. The same reason why young boys are reprimanded for preferring to play with dolls and wear skirts, while young girls are more often praised for not being afraid to get dirty, playing in the mud, and stuck with the label tomboy. In a patriarchal society, femininity is viewed, at best, as a cute deficiency, and at worst, as evil. Obviously, America has moved past witch trials, yet the disdain for femininity persists in slighter ways. Less boisterous, but loud enough to permeate the consciousness of media consumers of all genders. For years, teen rom-coms have disseminated the message that if girls want to be viewed as intelligent, interesting, and, in the end, worthy of an equally smart and steady boyfriend, they ultimately need to abandon their overly feminine qualities. Eliminate your vocal fry. Wipe off the lip gloss. Prove that you're the exception, the brilliant needle in the haystack of ditzy girlishness to be seen as having any kind of substance. Prove you're not like most girls to prove your significance.
Right. And it isn't too surprising to know that it is the opposites that have to fight, that the enemy would be the outsider. We would add to that the layers of makeover tropes, the betting trope, dude will definitely have sex with the unpopular girl who was hot all along, but they don't have sex. And instead, the dude, gets a redemption arc because at the last minute, he decided that's not a nice idea.
Mm-hmm.
But even without those types of tropes, we would still have the pretty girl versus the not as pretty girl. Or so we're told that, her curly hair makes her unpretty, or glasses. Am I right? Am I right?
As Huizinga writes, quote, and somehow the pendulum manages to swing to the other extreme too, conceiving a swarm of opposing but related identity issues. If girls don't conventionally groom or adorn themselves like the stereotypical woman, if they abandon makeup, long hair, and dresses, they are often seen as less of a girl. Sometimes they're asked if they are even girls at all, as conceptions of gender are inextricably tied up with appearances. And so a balancing act fit for the circus emerges. Girls quickly learn to be tightrope walkers, walking the fine line between being a socially acceptable, conventionally attractive woman, but not being so girlish that they're seen as stupid, unserious, or catty. Perhaps also while trying to figure out the person they want to be for themselves apart from the media influence, if that's even possible to discern. The stress of this balancing act bolsters an already thriving culture of competition among women. When the patriarchy only allows a small, fixed number of pedestals of power for women, they must fight each other for them, leading to a flourishing cesspool of internalized misogyny. Rather than targeting this energy towards dismantling the patriarchy, the source of this issue, girls express hatred toward other girls, their designated opponents. Instead of using some of this energy to uplift other girls, they direct it towards trying to be the exception to secure a spot on the prize pedestal, be it a gateway to a higher paying job, a boyfriend, or just healthy self-worth.
Right. And I feel like she kind of took what we were saying at the beginning, how no one was addressing that part. Everybody was just addressing, oh, mean girls can be mean. They can. We understand this, but why in this scenario? And yes, the usage of mean girl to propel the narrative that women can't be friends is not something new. And the foil, not like most girls trope, is placed to make sure that the friendship seems near impossible. Huizinga defines this not like most girls trope as the protagonist in our story. Unlike mean girls, she is pleasant and shows compassion to friends and strangers. She is often smart or talented in some secretive way, perhaps notably bookish, artistic, or athletic. When one of these hidden talents is uncovered, she piques the interest of another prominent character, typically the attractive boyfriend of the mean girl, or at least the interest. Strikingly, not like most girls, defining stable trait is the complete opposite of the mean girls. She is decidedly not feminine. She either subtly dresses more plain and boyish than the mean girl, more pants, less pink, or downright rejects fashion and makeup altogether, deeming it unnecessary or trivial. Her hair is either thrown up in a practical ponytail or stuffed into a knotted bundle atop her scalp. Rather than holding a handbag, she can be found roaming the hallways with her nose stuck in a book, clumsily bumping into fellow students. Yeah, this is, she's all that. For sure.
Okay.
She's all that. You've never seen that one, have you? I don't think you're missing much on that one, but
okay.
Except Usher.
That one does have the big like glasses, like the Hollywood movie makeup,
the
right?
glasses, the overalls, her hiding, and and then her. I want to say they're implying that he's autistic brother, but I don't think he is. I can't figure out what they're because he roller skates and decides to put pepper on everybody's lunch, and people make fun of him. I don't know. But yes, that's that one. But yeah.
Okay.
I the Usher scene, the bad dance scene is what pops into my head. This has become the age of women supporting women. And so the idea of mean girls have had to catch up to us, essentially. And since then, we've had that big conversation with mean girls asking, are you okay? No, really. Are you okay? You know, truly trying to get to the bottom.
Many would argue that the mean girl isn't actually mean, but angry and misunderstood. In fact, going back to the student we mentioned, Ivy Jen, who wrote about mean girls, she talks about the empowerment and evolving of female anger. Quote, not only are emotions expressed through behind-the-scenes manipulation, but oftentimes violent passion. Regina George's outburst in the conclusion of Mean Girls exemplified this. A woman can rage over reputation and money, exemplified by the character Renata Klein in Big Little Lies, showing that these outbursts may be a last resort for women to achieve what they covet. The Mean Girls trope to me is not about a character's personality, privilege, or materialistic tendencies, but rather the individual and societal factors behind a character's actions, words, or emotion.
And she isn't the only one who sees the evolution of a mean girl, or perhaps they would call it an update of it. Megan Argueta writes in her 2024 Movie Web article, the importance here is that the trope has gotten a touch-up, growing from the self-centered young woman who does not have much of a reason to be as hateful as she is, to a young woman who has dealt with her own hardships and feels that she is justified in how she reacts to things. This may not seem like a huge shift on the outside, but it really is when keeping the character up to date. Mean Girls are becoming more complex and relatable in the sense that audiences can sympathize with what they've been through, even if they do not fully condone how the young women handle things in the present. The trope is still at the forefront of many teen movies and shows, and a lot of the time they receive the spotlight to show how no one can really be considered, quote, good or bad. There is a gray middle ground where this trope now resides with this shift in this trope. They are able to fall in love, have genuine friends who do not stick with them due to their status, and become someone who is actually likable. This is a positive change to the formerly shallow trope, and we cannot wait to see what becomes of it in the future.
Or we have movies that break the stereotype pretty early on, such as in Encanto. As a Latter Days SaintGeeks.com article writes about the sisters Mirabel and Isabella, who seem to have nothing in common, and Mirabel seeing Isabella as the standard of the perfect, powerful daughter. But we quickly learn that isn't the case. Here's a quote. The room is covered in flower blossoms, and Isabella's bed is suspended from the ceiling by vines she controls. It's the girliest thing since the original My Little Pony series, only somehow less subtle. She tries to throw Mirabel out via vines when Mirabel starts challenging her about being perfect, temporarily giving up on the hug my sister to save the family plan. It's when Isabella starts to truly get mad, not flippantly annoyed, but actually mad, that she accidentally makes a cactus. The two sisters look surprised at the spiny addition to the room, and then Isabella breaks out into song. Apparently, with all her power, all she'd ever done was make flowers and vines grow. She had no idea she could affect other plants or make something that's not a traditionally pretty flower. This is where the mean girl trope spins on its head when we get insight into Isabella's so-called perfection. She feels like she has to be because that's what's best for the family.
Right. And here we don't see the mean girl trope being used as the antagonist, but more of the revelation for both the hero and her family to a problem that has to be solved in order to save all of them. And as the article continues, once again, Encanto flips this trope over by having Isabella conjure plants with colorful pollen, which he then voluntarily gets on her clothes and her hair, ruining her pretty pink dress. In the end of the song, her and Mirabel are covered in color from the plants, a complete mess, and smiling happily. The sisters finally embrace in the mess they've made, allowing each other to be their imperfect selves and loving each other for it instead of in spite of it. Isabella ruining her dress on purpose shows her breakneck growth as a character. She's not trying to be perfect and is now embracing all the imperfections, which allows her to have a relationship with her sister, who is considered the black sheep of the family. So a great example of what can be done and why it's necessary for the plot without making it sexist and gross. And as Aditi Murthy writes in her article titled, "Can we move on from the mean girl trope as a depiction of hyper-competitiveness between women?" in the swaddle.com, quote, waves of feminists have attempted to discern and work towards why women compete with each other and how they can work together instead. Their work ranges from the shine theory, which posits women's ability to befriend and learn from other women, to upholding kindness as a deeply underrated feminist way of life. This work is both possible and shows gradual results because they consider women's hyper-aggressiveness and competition as a reaction to societal forces rather than innate. This shift has yielded results. Mean girls on screen now come with nuance, background stories, and motivations because the audience will simply not accept women are catty. Negative, preppy, and competitive female characters now come with backstories. Cheryl Blossom in Riverdale are friendless for their competitive nature, Sharpay Evans in High School Musical, and are often redeemed as worthy of love. Again, Rosalie Hale, Twilight series, I love it. And you know what? I think it's working. I think this kind of ideal is working, and the fact that the audience is demanding more because. Again, there's great films and children's movies like Encanto that bring a different level to the trope, which does uphold kindness, as they write. But yes, there is a lot to be said about the evolution of the mean girl and a lot of work to be done. Again, like the whole sexual, the mean girl needs to be sexually experienced and sexual as a part of being cool. Interesting way of going. And I know there are a lot that we may not have tackled, and there are so many other references we haven't touched on, but it is interesting to see how these dated tropes have evolved as time passes. And hopefully, here's to see more encouraging adaptations of the mean girl, which honestly probably should be renamed by now, but hey, whatever.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that because women are so expected to be so nice, that mean girls have a lot of fans. A lot of the more recent ones have a lot of fans.
And we didn't really go into the queer
Yeah.
narrative of it. Again, ran out of time because I feel like that might be just like a Monday mini on its own.
Well, something to look forward to. So much to touch on here. But listeners, we would love to hear your favorite examples.
Yeah.
Yes, or your thoughts about this. You can email us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at @momstuffpodcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I'll Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
Yes, and thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.